Welcome into One of One Sports, the only one for your original sports commentary and analysis. It is time to do our college football week 2 predictions. Let's get into it. So last week, week 1 had a myriad of great games to predict. Got my vocab word in for the day. But yeah, we broke down 9 games. You can see the week 2 slate we're doing here is just going to be 6. We went 6-3 in last week's games. Missed 3 of the big ones, though, unfortunately. We predicted Clemson. We predicted Texas. And then, along with pretty much everyone else, we predicted Alabama to lose to Florida State. But still a winning record. We're hoping to improve on it in week 2 and getting started with the first game we're breaking down, and that is Illinois, the number 11 team in the AP poll, going on the road to Durham to take on the Duke Blue Devils. And my biggest key to the game is the Duke secondary, because looking at Illinois on paper, at least, now they played West Illinois, but there's not much, or Western Illinois, there's not much you can take away from that game. It's not a quality opponent. Don't know what to make of it, right? But on paper, Illinois returned a lot from last season. Luke Altmaier's back. The whole O-line returns. You got 3 running backs. And offensively, the only real question mark is the receivers you're losing. Duke's strength happens to be in the secondary, where they have an elite corner and an elite safety. If they can, cause problems for Illinois' receivers, if they're not getting separation, if they're not making plays, and Illinois becomes one-dimensional, I think that goes a long way towards the Blue Devils potentially winning this game. And then, obviously, you can always talk about quarterbacks in a college football game. But in this one especially, I think a lot of people are expecting Luke Altmaier and Illinois to have the quarterback edge in this game. I do not believe that. I believe Darian Mensah, transferring in from Tulane, is a better quarterback and will play better than Luke Altmaier. They paid him a ton of money to come to Duke to replace Malik Murphy. I think it's for a good reason. I think he is one of the best quarterbacks in the country, a dark horse Heisman contender, and is the reason I expect a lot of big things from Duke this year as a sleeper team in the ACC. I think he cannot be overlooked. I expect him to have a big day on Saturday at home. And then finally, the O-line battle. I mentioned Illinois returns 5 starters. Duke returns 4 of them. Both of them are going to look to assert themselves on the ground game, and I don't think either has a great interior D-line to prevent the rushing defense. Both have a pretty good pass rush. Both have decent secondary, but both are vulnerable to the run, and whichever O-line can really establish themselves could help them out. I've already kind of hinted at it here, but Duke is a team I think is one of the most underrated in the country. Illinois, I do think is a tad overrated based off what they did last year. I don't think they were as good as a lot of people thought, and I don't believe them as much as everyone else does this year. I certainly wouldn't have them ranked number 11 if I were a voter in the AP poll. And going on the road to Duke, I think it's going to be too much for him. I think Darian Mensah outperforms Luke Altmaier. I think the receivers struggle in the passing game, and I think Illinois doesn't put up a lot of points, and Duke wins this game at home, knocking off a borderline top 10 team and a huge win for the Duke Blue Devils. The next game we're breaking down is the Cy-Hawk battle, and we got to talk about Iowa's offense, which was not great against, I believe they played Albany, but yeah, Mark Gronkowski, kind of a lot of hype transferring in as maybe the best FCS quarterback last year. He comes into Iowa and he throws for 44 passing yards in his debut. Now, Iowa did run it 53 times, I believe, for like 300-something yards. But yeah, there was virtually no productivity from their passing game, and that's going to have to change against Iowa State. Iowa State, I do think, is vulnerable to a good passing attack. Unfortunately, I don't think Iowa has a good passing attack and is going to try to just beat them running the ball. So I expect yet another, like speaking of rivalry's recent history, like all the others, it's going to be grinded out. It's going to be low scoring. It's going to come down to the wire. I put down turnovers. Obviously, those are huge in every game, but especially in this type of game, special teams, turnovers, getting a short field at times, a bad punt here or there can change the margins, as I expect just a slugfest. And just if you make too many mistakes, I could see you losing this game. And ultimately, I think the reason Iowa State won it last year is because Rocco Beck in the clutch delivered. And looking at it, I just don't, based off last week, can't trust this Iowa offense to make any big plays. Maybe I'll be wrong, but I'm going to have to see it first. When Iowa State has the more experienced quarterback who's proven he can deliver in the clutch, who's already done it against a good team in Kansas State this year, there's too much for me to believe in Iowa State and too much unknown about Iowa. I have to go with the Cyclones to win this game for, is it the second or third year in a row? At least the second, I'm not sure, but at least the second year in a row, I'm going with the Cyclones to beat the Hawkeyes. Why did I blank on Iowa's name? The last game we're predicting from the early 9 a.m. window, or I guess for most people it's the noon window, but out here on the West Coast, 9 a.m. window. And the keys to this game, like last week's prediction, I'm going to talk about the Baylor run game, and it was a key to the game the sense it didn't show. Auburn limited Baylor to I believe under 100 rushing yards, and for a team that has one of the better backs in the country, Bryson Washington, with an experienced O line, and has the perimeter play and a great, or not great, but a good quarterback to supplement, they should have a really good rushing attack. It wasn't there against Auburn. It needs to be there against SMU. Then I think if you're a Baylor fan, you got to be concerned about Kevin Jennings beating you with QB runs in his legs because of what Jackson Arnold did to you. Jennings thought of as a dual threat quarterback for sure. And if Jackson Arnold put up over 100 on the ground, Kevin Jennings is definitely going to be a threat. There's, a thought out there that I kind of would agree with, that now that you know what your weaknesses is, you're going to be game planning for it. You're going to be coaching it up all through practice, and there is going to be a focus on, okay, we're not going to let quarterbacks beat us with their legs off, either drawn up QB runs or QB scrambles. It's going to be a point of emphasis, I would think, all week. That could be helpful to Baylor, that they already kind of struggled with it in week one. And then explosive plays. Both these teams showed in week one. Now, SMU is playing much more inferior competition, but that big plays can be a huge part of their offense. Whichever can generate more could potentially win this game. And for me, Baylor looks more explosive on paper because Bryson Washington can be a home run hitter. And these receivers, Josh Cameron, Michael Trigg, Kobe Prentice, there's a lot there to expose SMU defense that lost a lot from last year. They should still be decent, but I think Baylor can get a few more explosive plays. I expect a pretty high-scoring game, but they can contain Kevin Jennings enough to beat SMU, go on the road and get the win. You lost the one at home last week. You make up for it with a big win on the road against the Mustangs. I'm taking the Bears. Starting with the back half of games, we're predicting the Arizona State Sun Devils are traveling to Starkville to take on the Mississippi State Bulldogs. And we got to talk about the ASU rushing attack, because ASU obviously lost their best player from last season to the NFL in Cam Scadaboo. Probably the second best running back in all of college football to Ashton Jeanty last season. And it's a huge loss. And at least in week one against Northern Arizona, they didn't show really any semblance of replacing him. Now, Levitt was really good on the ground against NAU, but none of the other running backs that they brought in, Kanye Udo from Army is there. They have other guys as well. None of them emerge as someone that's going to be able to even come close to filling the void that was Cam Scadaboo. So that's why Levitt's legs are important to give ASU balance, and also somebody's got to emerge, you would think, to help out on the ground game, because Jordan Tyson, and sorry Mississippi State fans, but all the points here are to ASU, Jordan Tyson is a truly elite receiver and can be a game breaker, but I do think ASU needs to have at least a little balance, whether it be coming from the running backs or from Sam Levitt making plays on the ground. You got to have some of it, because Mississippi State is a really tough place to play. Now, on the Bulldog side of things, you're just not a very good team. There's not a lot to like here. You pulled away from Southern Mississippi eventually, but there were still struggles there, and this is probably the worst team in the SEC. ASU ranked, top 12 in the country. I think they're favored by 6.5. This is not one where I see the upset happening. Yes, ASU struggled against Northern Arizona, but maybe if Mississippi State was a middle of the pack SEC team, or even slightly less lower end, I could see the upset happening. But Mississippi State to me is just a pretty weak opponent. And ASU, I do think, has some issues that are being overlooked with Scadaboo leaving right now. But I think for at least another week, they'll put those off and get the win. In another showdown between two power conferences, we have the SEC's Vanderbilt taking on the ACC's Virginia Tech. And I want to talk about these Virginia Tech receivers, because they made some absolutely insane catches against South Carolina and showed they can win contested catches. Some of the Donovan Green, Hayden Green look like a dynamic duo of receiver. And if Kyron Jones is even somewhat accurate, they seem to be coming down with pretty much anything that hit their hands. And Vanderbilt, I want to talk about Diego Pavia, because outside of Eli Stowers and a decent O-line, there's not a ton of playmaking. At least there doesn't appear to be on this Vanderbilt team. It seems like you're asking a lot from your quarterback. And then finishing drives for Virginia Tech against South Carolina, you had a lot of drives where you moved the ball pretty well, but in the red zone, there were either turnovers or penalties or settling for field goals. You have to finish the drives if you're going to beat Vanderbilt. Now, I am slightly biased in this game, as I do root for Vanderbilt, but unfortunately, I do think Virginia Tech's going to finish those drives. And I do think having experienced already playing a good opponent in South Carolina, whereas Vanderbilt didn't get that, is going to help as well. Vanderbilt, it'll be kind of an adjustment playing power competition now. Virginia Tech, it's maybe even a slight down, or probably I would say a downgrade from what you played week one in South Carolina, and you're already really competitive against them. Now you're at home instead of playing a neutral site. I think there's a lot of advantages here to Virginia Tech. Correct your issues from week one, and capitalize on what you already did well in terms of the passing game. And Kyron Jones played one of his or below average game by his standard. I expect somewhat of a bounce back to more of his average level of play. And I think Virginia Tech, unfortunately, is going to beat Vanderbilt. Finally, the main event, and that is the Michigan Wolverines taking on the Oklahoma Sooners in Norman. Another game that I am somewhat biased in, as I do root for Michigan. And I think the number one talking point, I'm sure you're going to hear other places if you watch it, I think everyone has to mention it. Bryce Underwood, true freshman quarterback for Michigan, playing his first ever road game against a power competition in the SEC in Norman, Oklahoma. Notoriously tough place to play against a Brent Venables defense. It's a lot to ask. It really, really is. Brent Venables, known to be one of the best defensive minds in all of college football, for years captain what were elite defenses at Clemson. And since he's taken it over at OU, sure, Oklahoma has struggled, but that's mostly been offensive. The defense has done its part, and I expect it to still be doing its part this year, and that's why Bryce Underwood, you could expect, he didn't throw any interceptions week one. I'm expecting at least one interception in this game. Then you got to talk about the Oklahoma O-line, because last year it was abysmal, maybe the worst in all the Power Four. And it's kind of, you brought in, supplementary pieces, transfers, some new recruits to kind of make up for it. But just playing Illinois State, it's too hard to tell if you actually made those improvements. You take a big leap up taking on Michigan, which has some really, really elite players on the defensive line. If you're not improved, we're going to find out in a big way, and it's going to be a bad night for Oklahoma. And then the final key is just how big or how real are the offensive improvements that each of these teams made. Because I feel like I can still trust both their defenses. Michigan, I know they're going to have a good edge rush. The D-line is going to be good. I like their linebacker unit. The secondary is good. It's a lot of the same with Oklahoma as well. But Oklahoma, bringing in John Mateer and his OC from Washington State, you're expecting a big overhaul offensively. Same thing with Michigan, bringing in Bryce Underwood after the terrible quarterback play he got last year, bringing in some new wide receivers after lacking pretty much any explosive plays in the passing game. You're expecting big improvement. And if either of those are real, then we could see a higher scoring game than I'm anticipating. I'm expecting some struggles. I do think these teams made improvement, but I think the defense is going to be ahead of the offense in both these cases. I'm expecting some mistakes from Bryce Underwood. And then I also think Oklahoma, yes, John Mateer I think is good, but playing at Washington State, he hasn't seen an opponent like this. Add in that Jaden Ott, I don't know if he's going to play in this game, and they could have some struggles as well offensively. Other notes, just real quick, Michigan, Jayshon Barnum, one of your best defensive players, starting linebacker, suspended the first half after, in my opinion, a terrible targeting call against New Mexico, but that is worth mentioning. Like I said, I'm expecting a defensive matchup, a lot like we saw in a couple week one games with the Ohio State game, with the LSU game, where it just comes down to a few key plays which can swing it. And in that instance, I do think John Mateer at home is going to make the better plays than Bryce Underwood as a true freshman on the road against a really elite defensive coordinator. I think there's just going to be one too many mistakes for Michigan, and I don't think they're going to be able to lean on their ground game enough. They struggled a bit against New Mexico when if it wasn't a home run, they weren't getting as much yardage on the ground as I would have hoped. That makes me a little nervous, and so that's just the difference. I think it's going to be a really close game, pretty low scoring, and I think Oklahoma, unfortunately, as a Michigan fan, is going to win this game. So to recap, we have Duke over Illinois, we have Iowa State over Iowa, Baylor over SMU, ASU over Mississippi State, Virginia Tech over Vanderbilt, and Oklahoma over Michigan. That wraps up all my week 2 predictions. Can't wait to see it. Drop your predictions in the comment section down below. If you enjoy the college football content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to support the channel. Until next time.